Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 3 of the Monday Q&A. So let's do it. Richard Hawthorne, who by the way deadlifts almost 5 times his body weight, recommends using a narrow stance for the deadlift, slightly inside shoulder width. Personally, I feel like that's how I get the best leverage. However, I see a lot of world-class powerlifters using a very wide stance, not sumo, but outside of shoulder width, and they're pulling incredible weight. Yeah, this comes down to individual leverages, and you're going to be able to assess your own leverages yourself. It has to do with things like your hip structure, limb lengths and ratios. Those things are all going to affect this. And for Richard Hawthorne, the very narrow stance works very well. For you, it seems to get the best leverages. For me personally, I get the best pop off the floor on a deadlift with a very narrow stance. However, this is something that you have to experiment with, and you have to find your own personal leverages. And as your technique changes over time, you might find that your optimal stance will change also. So you do need to experiment around with it from time to time. But you, I, and Richard Hawthorne all seem to be in the same situation in that for that particular stance, we probably get the most pop off the very bottom of the floor, the best bar speeds. And if you can get a good bar speed off the bottom on a deadlift, with any given weight, odds are you're going to walk it. All right, next question. What's the best way for a novice to learn safe form for lifting? Reading books, hiring an S&C coach from the internet, or another way? Okay, for those who have the money, if you can afford a coach, then by all means, if it's within your budget and you don't mind spending the money, hire an S&C coach. No problem there. I would say some basic books can be helpful. Books like Starting Strength. While I'm not super wild about his particular squat style for the novice, even putting that aside, the overall safety and biomechanics in there for learning lifts safely for all your big lifts is really, really good. It's a good book for that. I think everyone should probably have Starting Strength in their collection if they lift. It's one of those must-have books, even if you don't really use it for much, just for some of that basic reference material and learning your lifts. And on top of that, you can find very good technique videos for any lift on YouTube if you look around. I don't currently have any up. At some point I may make some when my training situation changes where I can get good angles. But for now I don't, but I've seen plenty of really, really good ones out there. So that is also a good place to start. So those are all viable options kind of in that order. So S&C coach would be amazing if it's not a problem for you. Books next, YouTube channels are also very viable too. All right, next question. Do you think the rise in male eating disorders has been a link to all the hype about being aesthetic? I don't mean as the root cause, obviously, but do you see it as a pressured look onto males? Oh yeah, absolutely. Both inside the industry and without. We do see, just like they talk about with women, with the waifishly thin women, we now see a fairly skinny, fairly lean, without oftentimes a lot of muscle mass, which means starvation is definitely an option, look being portrayed by some celebrities, being portrayed by models, being portrayed by your Calvin Klein models and underwear models. It is pushed out there. And then when you get into the training world and the fitness world, so much of this needing to be super dry, ripped, and striated is pushed out by magazines and by the community and everything else, that I think it does contribute to this. Case in point, look how many people call me fat all the time. I hear it every day in videos. But when I walk out into the general public, nobody thinks I'm fat. Only people in that world who have that particular mindset, which I'm not even really part of the physique world, so who gives a fuck. But the thing is, someone who was even leaner than me would still be called fat. They would be considered fat. So there is that pressure there from the community if you happen to gravitate in those circles. I'm not saying it's the root cause, but for people who could come into these circles, it can be the root cause. And I think that's one of the reasons we do see so many eating disorders on the rise among young men now who train actively, who are part of the online fitness community. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.